Margarita looked back and saw some complex dark object catching up with her. As it drew nearer to Margarita, it became more distinct. A mounted flying person could be seen. And finally it became quite distinct. Slowing down, Natasha came abreast of Margarita. Completely naked, her disheveled hair flying in the air, she flew astride a fat hog, who was clutching a briefcase in his front hoofs, while his hind hoofs desperately threshed the air. Occasionally gleaming in the moonlight, then fading, the pince-nez that had fallen off his nose flew beside the hog on a string, and the hog's hat kept sliding down over his eyes. Taking a close look, Margarita recognized the hog as Nikolai Ivanovich, and then her laughter rang out over the forest, mingled with the laughter of Natasha. Natashka! Margarita shouted piercingly. You rubbed yourself with the cream? Darling! Natasha replied, awakening the sleeping pine forest with her shout. My French queen, I smeared it on him, too, on his bald head. Princess! The hog shouted tearfully, galloping along with his rider. Darling! Margarita Nikolaevna! Cried Natasha, riding beside Margarita, I confess, I took the cream. We, too, want to live and fly. Forgive me, my sovereign lady, I won't go back, not for anything. Ah, it's good, Margarita Nikolaevna. He propositioned me. Natasha began jabbing her finger into the neck of the abashedly huffing hog. Propositioned me. What was it you called me, eh? She shouted, leaning towards the hog's ear. Goddess! Howled the hog, I can't fly so fast. I may lose important papers, Natalia Prokofyevna, I protest. Ah, devil take you and your papers! Natasha shouted with a brazen guffaw. Please, Natalia Prokofyevna, someone may hear us. The hog yelled imploringly. Flying beside Margarita, Natasha laughingly told her what happened in the house after Margarita Nikolaevna flew off over the gates. Natasha confessed that, without ever touching any of the things she had been given, she threw off her clothes, rushed to the cream, and immediately smeared herself with it. The same thing happened with her as with her mistress. Just as Natasha, laughing with joy, was reveling in her own magical beauty before the mirror, the door opened and Nikolai Ivanovich appeared before her. He was agitated. In his hands he was holding Margarita Nikolaevna's shift and his own hat and briefcase. Seeing Natasha, Nikolai Ivanovich was dumbfounded. Getting some control of himself, all red as a lobster, he announced that he felt it was his duty to pick up the little shift and bring it personally. The things he said, the blackguard. Natasha shrieked and laughed. The things he said, the things he tempted me to do. The money he promised. He said Klivia Petrovna would never learn of it. Well, speak, am I lying? Natasha shouted to the hog, who only turned his muzzle away abashedly. In the bedroom, carried away with her own mischief, Natasha dabbed some cream on Nikolai Ivanovich and was herself struck dumb with astonishment. The respectable ground floor tenant's face shrank to a pig's snout, and his hands and feet acquired little hoofs. Looking at himself in the mirror, Nikolai Ivanovich let out a wild and desperate howl, but it was already too late. A few seconds later, saddled up, he was flying out of Moscow to devil knows where, sobbing with grief. I demand that my normal appearance be restored to me. The hog suddenly grunted hoarsely, somewhere between frenzy and supplication. I'm not going to fly to any illegal gathering. Margarita Nikolaevna, it's your duty to call your housekeeper to order. Ah, so now I'm a housekeeper? A housekeeper? Natasha cried, pinching the hog's ear. And I used to be a goddess? What was it you called me? Venus. The hog replied tearfully, as he flew over a brook bubbling between stones, his little hoofs brushing the hazel bushes. Venus. Venus. Natasha cried triumphantly, one hand on her hip, the other stretched out towards the moon. Margarita. Queen. Intercede for me so that I can stay a witch. They'll do anything for you, you have been granted power. And Margarita responded. All right, I promise. Thank you, exclaimed Natasha, and suddenly she cried out sharply and somehow longingly, hey. Hey. Faster. Faster. Come on, speed it up. She dug her heels into the hog's sides, which had grown thinner during this insane ride, and he tore on, so that the air ripped open again, and a moment later Natasha could be seen only as a black speck in the distance, then vanished completely, and the noise of her flight melted away. Margarita flew as slowly as before through the deserted and unfamiliar place, over hills strewn with occasional boulders among huge, widely spaced pines. Margarita now flew not over the tops of the pines but between their trunks, silvered on one side by the moon. The light shadow of the flying woman glided over the ground ahead, the moon shining now on Margarita's back. Margarita sensed the proximity of water, and guessed that her goal was near. The pines parted and Margarita rode slowly through the air up to a chalk cliff. Beyond this cliff, down in the shadows, lay a river. Mist hung clinging to the bushes on the cliff, but the opposite bank was flat and low.